সুপ্রিয় দর্শক, সবাইকে স্বাগত জানাচ্ছি টিভিএন 24 টেলিভিশন আয়োজিত নিয়মিত অনুষ্ঠান টিভিএন অ্যানালিসিস। আমি হাবিব রহমান আছি আপনাদের সাথে। যারা সরাসরি দেখছেন, যারা বাসা বসে দেখছেন, যারা পরবর্তীতে ফেসবুকে যারা ফেসবুক লাইভে দেখছেন, পরবর্তীতে সোশ্যাল মিডিয়া ইউটিউবে দেখবেন, আশা করি সবাই ভালো আছেন, সুস্থ আছেন। আজকের অনুষ্ঠানটি একটু ভিন্ন, কিন্তু অত্যন্ত অত্যন্ত গুরুত্বপূর্ণ। কেন সেটি এখনই জানবেন। প্রথম কথা হচ্ছে, আমরা অনেকেই সম্পদ করি। We buy a house, buy cars, buy jewelries, stock থাকে আমাদের, রিটায়ারমেন্ট 401k থাকে, রথ আইরে থাকে, অনেক কিছু থেকে থাকে। কিন্তু আপনি কিভাবে জানেন আপনি সুরক্ষিত? আপনি বর্তমান আছেন, কিন্তু আমরা ধরেই নেই যে কোনো না কোনো একদিন আপনাকে চলে যেতে হবে অনেকগুলি কারণে। হয়তো স্বাভাবিক ন্যাচারাল ডেথ হতে পারে, or in immigration case somebody could be deported. তখন আপনার এই যে সম্পদ, এই ব্যাংকে রাখা অর্থ, 401k, স্টক, ক্যাশ, জুয়েলারিজ, এনি অ্যাসেটস, কি হবে সেই সব সম্পদের? এটি নিয়ে আজকের অনুষ্ঠান। এবং এই অনুষ্ঠানে today joining me Affar Baksh. He is an attorney. Welcome.
Everybody, thank you so much for having me on.
I'm glad that you are here. It's a different type of program, but I think it's so important that people to know what, who, when, and how you can end up losing everything that you have built with years of hard work. So I am going to ask you some questions. I am also new into this. I'm sure people who are watching today, আপনারা যারা দেখছেন, আপনাদের কাছেও অনুষ্ঠানটি একেবারে নতুন মনে হবে। কিন্তু ট্রাস্ট মি, আজকের অনুষ্ঠানটা দেখার পরে আপনি মনে করবেন এই প্রশ্ন আপনার মনে ইতিপূর্বে বেশ কয়েকবার জেগেছে, অথবা একবারও না আসলে এখন মনে করবেন কেন আসলো না, অত্যন্ত গুরুত্বপূর্ণ। সো আমি আজকে শুরু করবো। I am going to start with very simple things. We have some preconceived notion about assets. That I have an asset, I have a house, I have 401k, I have some stock or may not have a stock, I have some cash in the bank. Even if I pass away or I die, it will automatically go to my wife, my kids. I don't have to do anything. We're gonna start from there. However, there are more things I'm going to add as we go on and progress with the discussion. Let's start with this. Is this accurate? If not, why and what's happening here?
So what happens is, if you were to die, it's called die intestate. Right? Intestate means that you don't die you die without a will, or you die without a trust. So at that point, the courts would then decide, pursuant to the EPTL, which is the estates law, who gets what, right? So one, how your wife and children get the property. So what happens is, let's say you have a real estate.
Correct.
You own some houses. A big misconception is that, my wife automatically gets it. So you'll have a husband who's on the title alone, and then he's expecting his wife to just automatically be on title. That's not the case. So what happens is, unfortunately, the spouse will have to go to court, spend about $7,000 to $8,000, wait about 6 to 9 months to get this letter, which approves her to be the owner of the property. Now, what makes it even worse is that instead of her being the owner by herself, which is normally how you would title the property,
right?
You do it as tenants by the entirety. She is now tied to her children because the intestate law says that she gets half plus $50,000, and then the remaining children get it pro rata, meaning equally. So now she's tied to these children for the rest of her life. She cannot sell until she gets those children permission.
So you're telling me, after spending about 10 grand and 6 to 8 months running around in the court, after somebody's husband passes away, in this case scenario, she gets the ownership of the property,
half.
But if you have 2 children, those children will automatically be attached to that property, and that woman or wife whose husband just passed away will not be able to sell that property. This is how dangerous it is. This is how hard it is. Now, in other cases, we hear that if you, in some cases, that if you don't do anything, don't act on it, you just explained that you don't get that property, you have to go to the court.
Yeah.
And if you don't do it, we hear sometimes horror stories such as the state is going to come and take it. Is that so?
So there's a thing called escheatment, right? So I don't have the exact law on that, but over a certain amount of years, if no one claims that property, the state will take it over and sell it.
The state will take it over
and sell it.
Yeah,
let's say taxes are not being paid.
Right.
These kind of things, right? So that's one of the worries. That's one of the worries. Second worries is that there's no planning. I know I'm maybe jumping ahead, but there's no planning on the transfer of generational wealth. Right?
No planning of transfer of generational wealth.
Right.
I mean, this is a heavy word. I'm going to skip some part of it. So explain to me in layman's terms, because I have so many other questions here.
So let's say you're not doing any kind of estate planning. You die without a will, without anything, without a trust, right? You're unable to transfer the property free of some taxes, right? So taxes, that's probably going to be another session just on it. But just so you know, if you're able to do this trust, you get what's called a stepped up in basis. So let's say you bought the property, which is common. Many of our Bengali community bought the properties 20 years ago. They bought it for $500,000, now worth $1 million. Your children, when they sell it, will owe about $100,000 in capital gains tax.
So
if you die without nothing, they have to pay.
You die, a person dies without a will or a trust. We're going to come to will and trust a little bit later.
Yep.
Then you bought a property, or I bought a property, and that's $500,000. Now with the passes of time, it's $1 million. My children gets it, and they decided to sell. And then when they sell it, there is a tax. What is it called?
Capital gains tax.
The capital gain tax, just like stock market. And that's $100,000 in this scenario.
Yeah.
I want you to,
which could be avoided.
Which can be avoided if we are coming to the if.
Exactly.
All right. So there are many misconceptions that we're going to talk about. That the property automatically goes to your wife, which is not true, and kids. You just talked about it. If you, I don't want to talk about this one. I'm going to talk about this a little bit, but let me just touch on this. There are people who are undocumented, living here 30 years, 20 years, 50 years, not 50 years, 20, 30 years. What happens to their property if they don't have a will or a trust?
Yeah, that is, they're in a bind, right? So what I have been planning is that we've created a trust,
right?
And then we put let's say a family member who is a U.S. citizen as a trustee, and then I advise on one of the terminology that we're going to go through today, a trust protector. So this trust protector is somebody who kind of checks this trustee, right? And we just kind of make sure that he's actually doing what he's supposed to do, right? So if the trust, let's say, God forbid, your brother decides he wants to sell the property, this trust protector would say, no, that's not the intent of the grantor.
Correct.
Right? And he could stop that sale, right?
Okay.
So, and to make sure that your kids actually get it. So that's like really important.
Right. So I think there's a lot to it. We're going to get to it. But let's...
but there is a way to protect you.
There is a way to protect, and we will discuss, because দর্শক আপনারা যারা দেখছেন এটি আমরা কয়েকটি পর্ব করব. This is very important for everybody to protect your own rights and interests and assets for you, for your future generation. আমরা এটি কয়েকটি পর্বে করব. Okay. Now, there is a misconception also. I have a will. I don't need a trust, and I don't understand the concept of trust. It's too convoluted, too strong, too complex for me. If you could explain to us what is a will and what is a trust. I'm going to go to trust in generally. We're going to talk about it. But if you were to tell me the difference between them.
Yeah, so it's a two-way relationship versus a three-way relationship. Right. So your will is just the person, the testator. He's just saying, I want my beneficiaries to get X, Y, and Z. Right?
Right.
That's basically it.
Correct.
Right? There's really not much planning involved in that. Whereas in a trust, it's a written agreement where there's a three-way relationship. So you have this person who's a grantor, which is you, the owner of the property. We have what's called a trustee, which is this fiduciary, this person who will operate the property, right? Manage your trust according to your terms, and then the beneficiary, the person who receives it, right?
Right. There are more to it. We're going to come to it. it.
Right. Those are the parties, right? And then within that trust, you're now planning, as we go through it, planning a tremendous amount of contingencies.
Right.
And that's what that trust really allows us to do.
We're going to come to it in a second. Now, as you were explaining, I was sparking a little bit because there are two questions. Lipi Razi or Bangla bole ki hoy? Unfortunately, Affar Baksh it's not so good in Bangla. Maybe in coming days, in future. But for now, and I'll try to explain more things. However, there are two questions came. On the surface, when you look into this question, you may laugh. But I think both the questions are valid for today's discussions and scope that we are discussing. So first, I'm going to take the lighter one. Janib Hassan, he is saying, husband dies, wife gets, if husband dies and wife doesn't get the property automatically, so why, if there is a divorce, she gets the 50%? How weird is this? So that's why I was laughing.
It's a good question.
It's a very good question. It's a very good question. That's a different discussion. I will give you a hint. You need a prenup.
Which actually, this trust can actually act as a prenup.
And so we will talk about that. The question you ask, we will talk about this. And then this
but on a more basic question, right? That's just the law.
That's just the law.
Yeah.
That's just I mean, there's
In
a
answer
way.
to his question.
There's a way you can actually protect yourself if you are suspicious that this is a danger for your assets. If you are getting married to somebody and you are not comfortable. There are rules and barriers that you can put in, and prenup is one of those things. So we're going to talk about this. Tamanna Aziz, she said one thing that means, based on our discussion, if I have a property and I have to give my property to my kids before I die, otherwise they will not get it. I want you to explain.
No, that's horrible. That's the worst thing you can do. Great question.
This is one of the best questions I was expecting.
I see this happen so many times.
I want to explain this in Bangla so that everyone understands. আপনারা যারা দেখছেন প্রশ্নটি হচ্ছে এরকম and প্রশ্নটি শুনলে মনে হবে innocent question. It's not. It's a very deep question. তামান্না আজিজ জিজ্ঞেস করেছেন তার অর্থ কি আমরা যে আলোচনা করছি যদি উইল বা ট্রাস্ট না রেখে যাই তাহলে ওনার ছেলে মেয়েরা কিছু পাবে না। তার অর্থ হচ্ছে উনাকে আগেই ট্রান্সফার করে দিতে হবে তার অ্যাসেটস তার বাচ্চাদের নামে। I explained that to Affar Baksh, and he said this is one of the very scariest thing. Please explain.
All right. So what happens is when you have your property and you deed it to your children, okay?
Yeah.
They're of age and they get it, after they're 18 years old. That's the worst thing you can do because now they don't get the stepped up in basis, okay? They won't get the fair market value of the property when you pass away. It's deemed a gift. So you get carryover basis, not stepped up basis. So I just want you first, if you want to just, do you want to explain that first before we go on to?
So what you just said is that if you do that,
they'll have to pay capital gains tax.
They have to, okay. আপনি যদি আপনার বাচ্চাদের নামে আগে থেকেই সম্পত্তি করে দেন, no will, no trust, you transfer the wealth, তাহলে একটি ব্যাপারটা আছে, এটা গিফট হিসাবে আসবে এবং তার জন্য এই ট্রান্সফার অফ ওয়েলথ অর্থাৎ সম্পদের যে হস্তান্তরটা হলো যার জন্য আপনাকে ক্যাপিটাল গেইন ট্যাক্স পে করতে হবে। দ্যাটস নট এ গুড আইডিয়া বিকজ এই বার্ডেনটা আপনার ছেলে মেয়েদের উপরে পড়বে। ওকে, আই গট দ্য ফার্স্ট পার্ট ডান।
The second another problem is that now that children are on it, you cannot have any asset protection for them because now when they get married, the property is now part of the marital estate.
Okay. So the second problem, first problem, তাদেরকে এক্সট্রা ট্যাক্স দিতে হচ্ছে যেটি তার একটা বার্ডেনে পড়ে যাবে $100,000 or more. সেকেন্ড হচ্ছে যখন এই ট্রান্সফারটা তাদের বাচ্চাদের আপনার ছেলে মেয়ের নামে হয়ে গেল তখন আরেকটি সমস্যা হবে যখন তারা বিয়ে করবে তাদের ওয়াইফ যদি ছেলে হয়ে থাকে যদি মেয়ে থাকে তার হাজবেন্ড তারাও এই সম্পত্তির অংশ হয়ে দাঁড়ায়। That's the second the problem.
So now let's say the child,
yes.
You guys are living there for like 20, 30 years. Unfortunately now, one of your children gets divorced.
The spouse.
And that in-law says, I want my share.
Of course.
So now she's can literally force the sale.
To sell.
Right? Through the divorce,
Can happen.
Yeah.
Does happen.
a lot.
Yes.
Right. So that's why we tell them, do not ever do this. Right. And then the third thing is that you're tied to your children. Right. At that point. Right. You can't force them to get
not to do or what to do.
Right. So if you want to take a mortgage out, you want to sell, you want to relocate, you know, you're older, you want to leave New York, go to Florida, something like that, your kids don't have to sign.
That brings me to my first question. What do you do? And I know you're going to say trust. So second question, obviously, what is a trust? So let's start with what do you do in these scenarios to protect yourself, your future assets, and how do you do it?
Well, I mean, the trust, as I said, is it's a three-way relationship.
So
right?
basically, you do it through a trust.
Yeah, it's a written agreement.
Okay, so let's explain trust.
So somebody goes to an attorney, right, and then the attorney basically takes all your information and he creates this massive document, right, which addresses several issues, right? First, what is your intent? It addresses like how much is of your estate that you own. So most of the times, 99% of the times, you're going to do a simple trust because you're less than $7 million, right? So there's a thing in New York State that if you go over $7 million, there's an estate tax, right? So as long as you're under that, then it's pretty. Now you're addressing these contingencies as we were talking about, little nuances.
Right, nuances. You said. Now, if you're under $7 million, it's one equation.
Yeah.
If you go over it, it's a different equation.
Yeah.
So you talked about trust. Can you tell me what's the basics of trust?
The basics is this, how do I simplify it? You're able through this written document.
Right. So there's one piece of paper.
Yeah. So they just allow you, even though you're the grantor, you're the person who owns the property.
Right. The grantor is the one who owns the property. Make believe I am the one who owns the property,
so
and I am the grantor in this case.
So now one of the main reasons we do this is to avoid the court.
Right.
You go to an attorney.
Right.
After it's created, a half hour to an hour.
Correct.
You're now the children will now be the owners. That's one of the reasons we do this. So to avoid probate.
To avoid probate, avoid the court, avoid the taxation.
And the time.
And the time. And aggravation.
Right. Then there's the next level. Okay, so when the client comes to me, I say, do you have any reasons or things that you want to address with your children?
Correct.
Maybe you have a child who is unfortunately a little wayward. He has a lot of debts.
Possible.
Car accidents, judgments.
Okay.
Right? Maybe takes drugs, right?
Possible.
Right? So we would create this trust to make sure that this trustee is there to make sure he gets his money,
right? But
in the control of the trustee, not in the child's hands.
Okay. So I am the owner of the asset.
Yep, your dad.
So I'm a grantor.
Yep.
Let's make believe you are the trustee, meaning you are the one who I trusted with my assets.
Well, initially you'll be the trustee of your own trust.
I am also the trustee.
Yeah,
I'm also the trustee.
Initially you are, yeah.
Right.
But it's when you pass away.
When I'm not there anymore.
Yes. We set up set up another trustee for that child.
Okay. Now, the part you just said, আপনারা যারা দেখছেন, আপনার 3টি 4টি ছেলে মেয়ে থাকতে পারে, তাদের মধ্যে একজন হয়তো এমন থাকতে পারে who is addicted to drugs, maybe. যে অনেক পয়সা উড়ায়, অথবা যার মাদক সেবনের অভ্যাস আছে, অ্যালকোহলের সেবনের অভ্যাস আছে। আপনি নিশ্চয়ই চাবেন না যে আপনি যখন ট্রাস্টি তৈরি করছেন, একটা ট্রাস্ট তৈরি করছেন, সেখানে সমভাবে যে অর্থটা যে কোনো সময় নিয়ে যেতে পারে, যার জন্য আপনি নিজেও ট্রাস্টি, আপনার ট্রাস্টের, কিন্তু আরেকজন ট্রাস্টি থাকতে পারেন আপনি না থাকলে, আপনার অবর্তমানে। So who are the beneficiaries? Even though it's self-explanatory, let's explain.
Yeah. So it can be the children, right? It could be a loved one. It doesn't have to be your children. It can be charitable. Right?
Okay.
So I know a lot of people give their money to Darrell Luma, New York, right, doing it on 150th Street. A lot of people leave them as their ultimate beneficiary. So if everyone were to pass away,
right,
that school would get in. You would get Sadaqah Jariyah.
Correct. And now I'm coming to a different aspect. You have a basic trust. You have a grantor.
But you didn't ask one of the questions. Who
which
can
is
be a
what?
Trustee?
Huh?
Who can be a trustee?
Oh, thank you. So who can be trustee?
Okay, so
the two part of it. Who can be a trustee? And I hear many times the person who owns asset meaning who's setting up the trust with the help of a lawyer, it cannot be trustee. This is true.
Okay, so there's two parts to that, right?
Right, two parts of the question.
So the first part is the grantor can be the trustee of his own trust. Where it gets a little hairy is when you have this thing called an asset irrevocable trust. So now you're trying to prevent creditors from coming after your property, right? So a lot of attorneys, 90% of attorneys don't know that law, and there's a misconception, even with attorneys, that the grantor cannot be the trustee. And that's not true. I mean, we do those trusts. It is enforceable where even though the grantor is a trustee, as long as he doesn't take the property in his name, which we're not, and we're not taking any income from it, creditors do not have a right against it.
Okay.
But the second part is who's the actual person to be a trustee? So a lot of people, I get this question. Listen, I have a brother. I only have family in Bangladesh.
Right.
I have no one else to put.
True.
I cannot use that person. Has to be a U.S. citizen, green card holder.
So whoever becomes the trustee
Has to be a U.S. citizen, green card holder.
it's a requirement that U.S. citizen,
Yeah.
not a green card holder.
Yeah, that one I have to check, but I know definitely U.S. citizen.
Is definitely U.S. citizen.
Yeah.
Okay, let's continue.
Yeah.
So we got. What is a trust protector?
Okay. So remember how I was explaining earlier how for an undocumented.
Let's
people,
take
right?
that example.
Yeah. So this is again like a checks and balances. You have another trustee, so to speak, but his name is called a trust protector. It could be anybody that you trust. It could be a professional. It could be a CPA or accountant. Your CPA could be an attorney. It could be a friend. And basically what we do is, they have a copy of the trust. They see the terms of the trust. They know the intent of the trust, which is to get this property to the children. So let's say you put your brother, as a trustee. For whatever reason, listen, the brother is married to somebody.
Right.
It happens. Listen, you're working so hard for that property. Let's sell the property, and maybe we can invest and do something like that. And then the trust protector would say, no, that was there to pay for the kids' education, right? That was there to house them. That was there to do X, Y, and Z. So this trust protector is there to just make sure the trustee does what they're supposed to do.
Right. So, and we see that playing out many times, that people will come to you and say, you know what, your father bought this at $300,000. Look at this. This is $2 million property now. If you sell it now, the time is right. You can actually put away some money for these kids, for the schools, and the rest of the money you can invest into a business or stock market, and the things will go wrong.
100%.
Things will go wrong. And this is one of the main reasons that one must have trust. I have one other question, really good question. Mr. Hassan, thank you. আপনাকে অসংখ্য ধন্যবাদ। আপনি মনোযোগ দিয়ে শুনছেন। যারা দেখছেন শুনছেন, this is important for everybody. আপনার যদি বাসা থেকে থাকে, you own a house, multiple house, maybe you own business, maybe you own multiple gas stations, maybe আপনার
Maybe just own one house.
Or maybe
you don't have to be a billionaire.
You can also own restaurants or business places. It could be anything. These are all assets, right? এটি আপনার জন্য একেবারে must program. Okay, so Mr. Hassan said, when purchasing a house, they noticed that if the husband has an income and the wife is a homemaker, that's what they put it, if the wife is not working. The ownership documents typically, by the way, it's not true. However, typically he said, so it's true. The ownership documents typically list only the husband's name. He's talking about the deeds. Yeah. Okay. How can we ensure that both spouses' names are included on the ownership document, which is called deeds? Additionally, are there any extra cost associated with this process? I can express how important this part is when you are husband and wife, spouse, and actually getting your first, property, second property. And we were just minutes before this program, we were just talking about this part of it. So I'm going to bring that part into discussion, but let's explain this situation first.
Yeah, I mean, where you have the mortgage company, unfortunately, not able to put the wife on the deed even though she's just she's not on the loan. We could just do a deed transfer afterwards and put her on. Now, is that a breach of the loan documents? Yes, they are. Yes, that is. That is a breach of the loan document. Okay.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought it would have been just piece of cake, because I am the person who the mortgage has been assigned to, or the loan's taken out.
Yeah.
Right. And
that's a contract. It's an agreement.
It's a contract,
yeah.
and my wife can be the person who's in the deed. I may or may not be. Is that not the case?
So what'll happen is the bank, if they find out, they could accelerate the mortgage, right? So
they can.
Yeah, because you've breached the agreement. You've promised the lender that I'm the only person on the deed, and I'm the only person on the loan.
All right.
Right. That's why the mortgage is right. And that's an agreement. And if you were to change that, you're supposed to. Now, I have done this 7,500 closings.
Okay.
I've done well over 7,000 closings.
Okay.
Attorneys, I've done this for like 20. It is. I only heard it once. It happened that the bank.
Because I'm lacking because I've done it. I have done it.
I do it.
I've done it, and I did not see any issues. You just went through like
I do it. I do it. The only time I don't do it is when if I know that one of the deed holders has a judgment coming against them.
Hold there.
Yeah.
Hold that thought. Hold that thought. I am going to explain this, and then we're going to come back to it, because I know many wives who are watching this program. It's like, okay, we found a way to put our names there. Okay. which is good. I know. But husbands usually, we see they don't put the wives in the deeds, intentionally, unintentionally, whatever the case is. So you said that's not the case. It can be. Let's explain how it can be, because I think the person who's asking this question, who he really wants to know how that can be done.
What's that? The deed transfer?
The adding wife's name in the deed. Even the husband took out the loan, because the income differences and all.
I know we're off topic, right?
Yeah, a bit off topic.
But it's actually extremely simple. You just go to any attorney's office. We prepare, if it's New York City, we prepare a deed in ACRIS.
Right.
And then we just sign the documents. Having the husband sign as grantor.
Right.
He's also grantee. The wife is also grantee at that point, and they both name goes on as tenants by the entirety. So if one passes away, automatically goes to the spouse. But again, back to this trust, what happens, right, when one of those spouses pass away, right?
Right.
And that's where the problem comes in, right?
I know, it's just like catch-22.
Right? And then you have this idea of asset protection, which I think he had asked, somebody had asked a question on that, or I had alluded to it, that, you can use this trust as one of the reasons also is, let's say, so you have I have some young brothers come to me, they own the property, and they're going to get married in about, let's say, they're engaged and they're going to get married.
Right.
I told them, do an asset protection trust. So now it is not part of the marital property, which is huge.
I think this is something
that acts like a prenup. So no wife, no fiance is going to sign a prenup, right? They just, for whatever reason, they just don't sign. They say, you don't trust me, right? Right? But things happen.
Things happen.
60% of all marriages end in divorce. Yeah. So what we do is, to get around that, is to do this asset protection trust. So now it's not part of the marital estate. The son or whatever owns the property, and he maintains it with separate monies, and that's it. It's separate property.
So I'm going to ask one or two misconceptions, and then I'm going to go into two very important questions. I don't think we'll have enough time after that, but we have other episodes that we're going to cover this up. Misconception 1: your mortgage reduces your state tax. Please explain.
Okay. So you have the estate, right? So when a person passes away, the law creates this thing called an estate. Okay, it's a figment of imagination, so to speak. It's an estate, right? So this estate holds everything that you own. Okay. So what happens is the IRS says, listen, because you've lived in this country, you've benefited from these the protections of this country,
right,
you owe us some money, okay? And when the estates, there's two types of estates. There's a federal estate tax and a New York estate tax. So once the New York estate tax is above $7 million, this is just a quick note. It'll be $1 million in estate tax in New York State. It's ridiculous. It's really high. It's called a cliff. For federal, it'll drop in January 2026. It will be about, when you combine both of the estate taxes, it'll be about $13 million. So most people won't hit that threshold.
Yeah.
Right. But what the misconception is, like, well, okay, now I've got $7 million worth of property, or $8 million worth of property, but I have $4 million worth of mortgages on that property. So thus my estate is only $4 million.
Right.
Wrong. Right. I had a financial planner advising a whole bunch of doctors that's what the estate, you don't need a trust because you're way under, right? They had a lot of debt on the property, and and it was like 50% basically, and they didn't need the a trust. And I was just, I didn't know what to say.
You were mortified.
I didn't know what to say. I was speechless. I could talk, right? But I was just speechless, right?
Yeah. I'm going to go back to one other thing. When I told you hold that thought. You said there are certain things or situations you advise against adding somebody's name to the deed. One of them was if that person has judgment or bad credits, things like that. What are those things that you definitely tell people not to add somebody in that deeds if that person has those kind of things going on?
I don't know if it's so much to add them onto the deed. It's just that just know the repercussions that when you add your children on, you're hindering yourself. You're losing that ability to get to do as you wish on the property. Now,
right.
Some people I've seen, they've had their reasons why they put the child on, and I tell them don't take yourself off 100%. So there's a way. And again, we're diverting a little bit into real estate, but I think if you can just remember this, that you can create this thing called a life estate.
Yeah.
So the parent can stay in the property as long as they live. Maybe they have reasons, maybe Medicaid.
Yeah.
I know that I had one lady. She was concerned that her husband is a prior marriage. Right, so the son is from a prior husband, and she's with this current husband, and she had this concern that. Maybe that spouse may, go after that property if she passed away. So probably I advised her. I said, listen, just keep a life estate for yourself.
Yeah.
So God forbid you won't get kicked out, and then create a trust.
We are some topics we're talking about. It seems like or feels like outside of the trust, but these are all part of the assets.
Yeah,
and that's why they keep coming back, and they will keep coming back as we go on and discuss many things. I see one question, even though I was going to move on, but I think this question is very important because you already, one part you answered, the other part you also warned. So Sultana Rezia, she said, as you mentioned that, please pay attention, Sultana Rezia, because you are going to, আপনি খুব বড় mistake করে ফেলবেন যদি না এটি করেন এখন. As you mentioned that wife name can be added after buying house, the same way children's names can be added. You have to pay attention. আপনাকে খুব মনোযোগ দিয়ে এই মুহূর্তে শুনতে হবে, because উনি কিন্তু একটু আগে বলেছেন যে বাচ্চাদের যখন অ্যাড করবেন in that property as a trust or as a beneficiary, it's a problem again. So her question is, as you mentioned a few minutes ago, you can always add wife or husband after buying a house in the deeds. So that's one thing. She said, can I add children to that deed too? And
but we already discussed that.
Yeah, I know. Just
to summarize, basically, right?
I think
again, we're trying to avoid you losing the flexibility of disposing of property or taking more mortgages or whatever the case may be, in your lifetime. Number two, at that point, your children are in control, right?
Okay.
So they don't have to sell, they don't have to refinance without, without their permission.
Very simple. I hope আপনি আশা করি আপনি বুঝতে পেরেছেন, কিন্তু রিমেম্বার এই যে শোটি আমরা করছি ফর ট্রাস্ট, এটি কিন্তু শুধুমাত্র বিগিনিং. টুডে ইজ দ্য ফার্স্ট শো. আমরা এমন সব জাস্ট গিভিং ইউ সাম আইডিয়াজ, যে আসল কথাগুলো এখনো উইথ দ্য মেইন টপিকস উই হ্যাভেন্ট ইভেন টাচড.
But it's something that just came to mind that I would tell you, like, there's a thing in kids, we used to call it backseas.
Right.
There's no backseas.
Right.
Once you put your children on, They do not have to.
Yeah.
It's so simple. It takes all about 5 seconds. They sign their name on it, and so be very careful. Please.
And again, next time we'll tell you why. We'll bring an example, maybe a bad example, and then we'll tell you why. আশা করি আপনি থাকবেন আমাদের সাথে. Rizwan Hawk said, I am listening, not watching. Thank you for listening. Because this show requires listening more than anything else. We have, let's take a phone call.
Okay.
Yeah, কে আছেন আমাদের সাথে ফোনে? আপনি নামটি বলে প্রশ্নটি করুন, হ্যাঁ? আর ফোন যদি স্পিকারে থাকে দয়া করে একটু হাতে নিয়ে ফোন করবেন, কথা বলবেন, হ্যাঁ? হ্যালো? হ্যালো?
হ্যালো, আসসালামু আলাইকুম।
হ্যাঁ, ওয়ালাইকুম আসসালাম, শুনছি, বলুন।
আমার নাম রফিকুদ্দিন বাবুল। আমি একটি প্রশ্ন করতে চাই, সেটা হলো ফরপোজ বাড়িতে কি রেগুলার মর্টগেজ করা যায়?
আরেকবার প্রশ্ন করেন।
ফরপোজ অকশন থেকে বাড়ি কিনে কি রেগুলার মর্টগেজ করা যায়? আমরা
একটু শর্ট কি
ফরক্লোজার থেকে বা অকশন থেকে রেগুলার মর্টগেজ করা যায়?
ওকে, সো আমরা আজকে এই বিষয়টি আলোচনা করছি না, হ্যাঁ, we are not discussing this part today. His question was, can I buy something, if I buy a property with the short sale, can I transfer it, can I get a mortgage after that or on that? The short answer is yes, but the process is different.
Yes.
The question, আপনার সংক্ষিপ্ত উত্তর হচ্ছে yes, কিন্তু এর জন্য প্রসেস আছে, প্রসেসটা আমরা আলোচনা করব. Let's go into a different in discussion. As I told you, many times the stock market, your taxation, your property, and your real estate will come into our discussion. It's just this is where basically the crook of the whole discussion is going to be. So I know many people have many questions, and we will try to answer those questions as we go. Now, we talked about trust. We talked about trustee and beneficiary, right? You already talked about will and the trust, the difference between them. Who has, now I'm going to real discussions, right? Who has a legal, what is a legal title? That's one thing. And who has the legal title? Title is held by the trustee. Explain that to me a little bit, because it's very, for you, you're laughing, it's easy. For me, it's very difficult.
No, I think it's a great question, because a lot of people don't know, right? So, the trustee has legal title, right? The trustee can dispose of that property, so long as it's part, it's within the terms of the trust, right? So, for example, if you have what's called S&T trust, a supplemental needs trust, right? So let's say you have a child that's autistic or disabled, right? I mean, that trustee has a tremendous amount of burden, right? Responsibility,
yes,
right? So they can do a lot of things, right? So yeah, I mean, the law, is set up to avoid going to the courts, right? And that's why this trust is so important, because it allows the flexibility, of going to this trustee that you trust, which can be the grantor or it can be somebody else, right? So I guess there's so much flexibility with this, which
So we've been talking about trust, and trust. The one thing we touched many times, but I would like you to define state. You mentioned it few times. State. What is a state? What comes into a state?
Right? An estate.
Yeah.
So
we talked about many times state, and state. But people say, "Is this my home? Is the only thing? Is my bank account? What are included in it?"
Okay. So there's two parts, right? So there's an estate, and then for taxable estate,
right?
And then there's like a probate estate.
Okay.
All right. So for example, you will have properties that do not go to probate. So if it's tenants by the entirety, joint tenancy with survivorship, right? These are properties that pass outside of the will, right? Of the courts.
Yeah.
They happen automatically, right? So anything that happens automatically, right? By contract, for example.
Yeah.
Life insurance.
Yeah.
Not part of the probate.
Right.
But those items are part of your taxable estate.
Right.
So now, let's say you have a $5 million estate. You got a $2 million life insurance.
Yeah.
So it doesn't go to probate, right? But it is part of your taxable estate. So now that estate has to pay an estate tax, New York State. So it's very tough. I wish I had a diagram to show you. Almost look at it.
Next time we will.
Right. So almost like two circles that cross each other. So they're intertwined, but it's separate. It doesn't go. So right. So anything that's by contract, anything by deeds that happen by survivor, these things are not part of probate, but they do fall into this estate, this basket that holds everything. And again, and there's a computation.
Right. I mean, each time I'm looking at a new question, and it just, I'm asking myself, I shouldn't be asking this question to you, but they're watching. So I want to tell everybody, আমি আপনাদের সবাইকে একটু বলছি, আজকে যে ডিসকাশনটা শুনে মনে হবে এটি আপনার প্রয়োজন নেই. You don't need this. It's okay. My kids will. Trust me. This is the most important thing after getting asset. আপনি যখন সম্পদ করে ফেলবেন, when you acquire asset, আপনাকে এটা প্রোটেক্ট করতে হবে. এটা অটোমেটিক প্রোটেকশন হয় না. এন্ড আমি এটি বলছি কারণ আমরা এই ডিসকাশনে আগামীতে যাব. আজকে শুধু ফাউন্ডেশনটি নিয়ে কথা বলছি. We are just talking about the foundations. এবং আপনাদের অনেকের কাছে, for many of you, it will be confusing in the beginning because he mentioned something probate. I did not touch probate. We will touch probate very soon. There's a question. It says, thank you for answering my question. You are welcome. We are here to answer your questions. We would like you to ask many questions. Now, she said, continue discussing about trust. That's exactly what we're doing. She said, how can I start a trust? Very important questions. In our next episode, we will actually sit down with a diagram and more. How can you start a trust? And what are the good and the bad? That's exactly would be our next episode. We will talk about how can you start a trust. Trust me, Sultan Razia, আপনি একটি প্রশ্ন করেছেন যেটি আমাদের সবার কি জানতে হবে এটা. আপনাদের যাদের সম্পত্তি আছে, আপনারা যারা অনুষ্ঠানটি লাইভ দেখছেন, পরবর্তী সোশ্যাল মিডিয়ায় যাবে, আপনারা আপনার প্রিয়জনদের সাথে আলাপ করবেন. This is, you worked hard for asset to build. It could be your house, it could be your 401k, it could be Roth IRA, it could be your stock, it could be anything, assets, any assets that আমরা একটা লিস্ট তৈরি করব এই অ্যাসেটগুলোর. So আপনি এটা প্রোটেক্ট না করলে you're going to lose it. আপনার বাচ্চাদের কাছে যাবে, they're going to end up paying heavy taxes. Yeah. So this is very important. We also, just one thing I want to touch before we go, because there are many things we talked about. If you were to summarize today's discussion, right? What would people should actually think about today's discussion? Because this is the first time they are hearing us. I want you to give a not comprehensive, but a summary so that they understand what it was this program about and what's coming next.
Okay, so I would say that if you have an asset, right, and you want it to be easy for your children, because the trust is not for you. The trust is for your children, okay? If you want it to be easy for them, so they don't have to go to court, they don't have to pay any legal fees, they can avoid any kind of taxes, so that when you do give them a property, they do get 100% of that asset, not 70% of that asset, right? If they have to pay taxes, right? If you have children that are of disability, we can plan for this. So this trust is just a way for us to avoid these bad things, plan for some contingencies, and the courts have allowed us, or Congress have enacted laws that allow us to avoid these things.
Correct.
But we have to avail ourselves of it. So I always tell people, don't work harder, work smarter.
And that's why this program is for them. Okay. So we're going to end it here today. We're going to come back with the next episode, and now you have an idea and I have a good idea what we're going to talk about, and how, as you can understand, people need to see this visually. So we will work. আমি আপনাদের কাছে প্রতিশ্রুতি দিচ্ছি এই প্রোগ্রামের পরবর্তী এপিসোডগুলি হবে, এবং সেই এপিসোডগুলো আমরা আরও সহজ অর্থে উইথ গ্রাফস অ্যান্ড এভরিথিং আমরা তুলে ধরার চেষ্টা করব. সেখানেও থাকবেন আপনারা, আমি বলছি, আমি আশা করছি। দুঃখিত।
And if I'm in Queens, so if they want to come by, drop by.
Yeah, absolutely. The slide has as your number and office number. They can contact you. আজকের অনুষ্ঠান এখানে শেষ করছি, বিদায় নিচ্ছি। দেখা হবে পরবর্তী অনুষ্ঠানে। শুভরাত্রি।
TBN 24 টেলিভিশন দেখতে আজই কল করুন 7187776556। লগ ইন করুন www.totalcablebd.com।
নিউ ইয়র্ক থেকে সম্প্রচারিত TBN 24 টেলিভিশন বিশ্বজুড়ে বাঙালির কণ্ঠস্বর।